Welcome to Chalk Dust. It's the podcast that gives you a front row seat into some of the best classrooms in the world. We're using real-time classroom footage and making it available to you to observe, to learn from, and to take to your colleagues to implement into your own classrooms. I'm Dr. Nathaniel Swain.
And I'm Rebecca Batch.
I'm an instructional coach and a teacher, and I work with schools and systems around the world to improve classroom practice and school improvement.
And I'm currently head of secondary learning at Catholic Schools Parramatta Diocese, looking after the professional learning of 22 secondary schools. I'm also completing PhD research on how explicit instruction supports student wellbeing.
And as you might know, Chalk Dust is a different kind of podcast. If you like what we're doing and you think it would help some of your colleagues, do give us a like or a follow and send them a link.
I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands I'm recording from. Today I'm recording from Gadigal country in Sydney.
And I'd like to pay my respects to the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations at home in Melbourne today. So today we're joined by John Mighton. His amazing work fosters numeracy and children's self-confidence and abilities in maths, and is widely recognised around the world. He's been awarded an Ashoka Fellow and an Officer of the Order of Canada for his achievements. That's a really big honour. A Fellow of the Fields Institute for Research in Mathematical Sciences, John has also taught mathematics at the University of Toronto. However, his success in math did not come easily. We might ask him about that a little bit later.
And I was lucky enough to hear about John's work again at a conference I just went to in Fremantle, where one of the titles of John's books was put up on the screen saying that people are getting really into some of his older publications. So very exciting to have you with us, John.
Thank you.
All right. So John, I'm going to ask you, you probably picked up in the introduction, I'm a secondary English teacher. So I'm going to ask you to do two things, if you would. I would like you to give us the secondary English teacher version of what Jump Math is. And then I'd like you to give us the full-blown Math Nerd version.
Actually, it's odd because my first career was in the arts and in writing. I'm a playwright. Because I almost failed calculus at university, I didn't think I had a talent in math. I actually didn't think I had a talent in reading either, or writing. I didn't think I think I got the lowest mark in my creative writing course. And it was only when I discovered, after I graduated, the letters of Sylvia Plath. She wrote these letters to her mother. And it was clear she trained herself to be a writer through sheer determination. And that was I can talk about that, but that was a turning point in my life because it was the first time I realized there was a path I could follow to develop a skill for something. And so Jump is based on the same insight I gained from studying her work and her techniques. You know, that you could learn through imitation, that you could learn through practice, that if you broke things down into manageable chunks or tasks, you could get better and better. All the research behind deliberate practice, the Goldilocks zone, not pushing yourself too far. I just learned that by following the path she took as a writer.
And when I asked you for the English teacher version, I did not know you were going to go into a full-blown Sylvia Plath-inspired explanation. So that's extremely satisfying for me to hear that.
I think you've won Rebecca over with that as well.
And a couple of our other Chalk Dust listeners as well, I
think. Definitely.
Yeah.
And John, can you go into a bit more detail about, if you're a mathematics teacher, what are the principles behind Jump Math?
Yeah, so the second turning point for me was when I was starting out as a writer. I had to earn a living, and so I started doing a bit of tutoring, and one of my first students was in a remedial grade 6 class, and his mom had been told by the school that he could never learn math. He was just too challenged. So he's now a fully tenured math professor. And so that really changed my life. It was another turning point in my life, working with students who were challenged for two reasons. First, I had to work my way back through the math, starting at a grade 6 level. And suddenly became clear to me that as an adult, going through things at my own pace, that the math was way easier than I thought. And some of the things that were totally mysterious to me, like why is a negative times a negative a positive, and things like that, became crystal clear. And I began to think that I could actually understand the math at a deep level. And also it was such a gift to work with students like that boy, because I saw from their determination and the gains they made that the brain seemed to be really plastic. And that also gave me confidence to go back and do math eventually. And even now as a mathematician, I have a bit of a lingering anxiety, even though I've made discoveries in math that came from my struggles. So I don't feel I understand anything in math unless I can reduce it to a level that a grade 6 kid could understand, or even earlier. And I found I can do that surprisingly, even in calculus. And there's research now that math should be accessible to every brain if you can find a way to break concepts down into, most elementary chunks or units or steps, and help students make the connections themselves. There's a lot of evidence suggesting that explicit instruction produces better results, but I think you can combine that with a form of inquiry where you're asking Socratic questions, and if those questions are good, the kids can figure things out for themselves. So that's one element of jump math, or what I discovered is that you can develop a series of questions or activities that allow kids to make those discoveries. But it's not like pure discovery, it's guided. There's a lot of assessment. The teacher knows moment by moment what the student knows. And there's practice. And, I can get into more depth on this. That's sort of the side that's really well connected to the science of learning. That, kids suffer from cognitive overload, that they need practice, that they need guidance. But there's a whole other side that I'd love to talk about that's connected to the science of motivation. It's not really part of the discussion, I think. And I can come back or look at that in more depth.
I know we've got limited time this evening, but I just wrote an article actually about expertise reversal effect and gifted learners. And there was some research that suggested that a constrained period of discovery was better for the learning of more capable learners, but also that it didn't harm anyone else. Right. Do you know what I'm saying? Right. So we can go down this path for a while to serve our gifted learners, and that might be our nod to differentiation. But I found it really interesting that no one was harmed by it. People still learn things, even if they went through that discovery phase with the more able learners. So I think there's something in you saying, and I think that sometimes when you got a hammer, everything looks like a nail, and that sort of puts teacher expertise to the side. Now, this is going to be a slight rabbit hole, but I also read an article saying that, actually listened to another podcast, which was about how there might be a generation of teachers with AI who have never crafted those questions. And it sounds like you've come to this from a place of deep curiosity and also kind of practice and struggle in your thinking, but that has given you kind of these gems of the types of questions that might lead to struggle that is not unproductive, that it's that sweet spot between productive struggle and unproductive struggle.
And it's hard because the terms are so loaded. So we call jump structured inquiry because we didn't want to get into debates around pure discovery and things like that. That level of inquiry, kids are, one of the professors we're working with at the University of Calgary, Brent Davis, who's a real hero of mine, calls it helping kids make critical discernment. You're helping them make analogies, make connections, see how something works. But the thing that's radically different, I think, about jump is the level of micro-scaffolding. Even after I taught that book, when I started Jump is a charity, and I wanted to help some local kids. So it just started as a tutoring organization where I got volunteers to come to my apartment at first, and we ran after-school program. One of the first girls who arrived was in grade 6, and she couldn't count by twos in grade 6. She'd never heard of multiplication. I was going to teach her fractions, but she couldn't multiply. She was testing it at a grade 1 level, and they thought her IQ was 70. They tested her and had a mild intellectual disability. So I had to really learn how to scaffold for her, to the point where I had to teach her to multiply by skip counting on her fingers. Like I said, you can 3 times 2 is 2, 4, 6. Stop when you have 3 fingers up. I taught her how to count by twos on her fingers. And I was able to reduce all fractions operations literally to tasks where she would put her finger on the bigger denominator. She'd skip count by that number. She'd tell me if she ever said the other number. It was, and I was showing with her pictures why it worked. But because she was so challenged, I'd never taught a student like that. I had to learn to break things into the most simple tasks, and I found I could build the concepts up from there. So when I tutored her for 3 years, and when she hit grade 9, she insisted on going into academic grade 9 math. So she had to catch up 3 years and then 100 hours of tutoring. 9 years, sorry. And I was terrified that she couldn't make it, but she not only finished grade 9, she skipped a year and finished grade 10 in the same year. And so then I started to see the power of the scaffolding. Here's why there's some evidence that it should work. French neurologists did brain scans of mathematicians and found that we use a really primitive part of the brain when we're solving problems that has the same sense of space and number that kindergarten kids do.
Yeah.
And that wasn't a shock to me when I heard about it, because I had to reduce things to that level for myself. And so you can teach calculus that way if you really know the calculus deeply. Logicians proved 100 years ago that all math can be reduced to extraordinarily simple things. I think that has to be a starting point in a lot of our debates. How have we made this subject that there's evidence should be the most accessible? And I've seen it with thousands and thousands of students. How have we turned it into the hardest subject and the subject that becomes a barrier? So that, for instance, there's evidence that at college level, it's one of the biggest barriers to get any college course or university course, because the kids can't pass even the math for the trades or culinary arts. So how have we turned a subject that may be the most accessible subject,
Very teachable.
the one that's the greatest barrier? Yeah.
Yeah, what a great explanation. Thank you.
I'd love to get your take, John, on what we're about to see in the first clip, where we're looking at confidence building in a grade 2 classroom. Give us a little preview, if you like, of what we're about to see, just to frame up what we're looking for.
Well, when I was talking about the science of motivation, there's a wonderful marriage between the science of motivation and the science of learning. There's an article I saw in Nature magazine, which is a great scientific journal, and the title is The 85% Rule for Optimal Learning. And in that article, they argue that there's evidence that we're happiest and learn best when we're about 85% proficient at something. We've almost got it, but we're just stretching ourselves a little bit. Apparently, there's even a dopamine reward for being in that zone.
Wow.
And some people call it the Goldilocks zone,
Yep.
the zone of proximal development. There's so many different names for that zone. It's a zone where you're doing deliberate practice. You're not pushing yourself too far. So I found that kids are very happy in that zone. And here's the thing that I think is not on anyone's radar. What if you could take away the hierarchies in the classroom? Because there's research as early as grade 1 that kids know if a teacher has different expectations, no matter how good the teacher is, no matter how loving. We have a radar for knowing where we are in a hierarchy. Like anthropologists call humans status-seeking primates. And how many math programs take account of that when people are figuring out what's the best pathway through the math? People say, well, how can you reduce the hierarchies in the classroom or the visible hierarchies? Because there's always going to be differences between kids, but how do you make them feel they're doing the same work or meeting your expectations as a teacher? Because I found I do hundreds of demo lessons. Once I do that, I've got a different classroom. I have a classroom where everyone's brain is working and where they're in that zone. So that's what this clip is about. I made sure that all the kids could read numbers in the hundreds. So there's an exercise that you don't see before the clip. But I was 100% certain that they could all read numbers in hundreds. They were grade 2 kids. And then I just taught them how to read bigger numbers because, our number system comes in the West in groups of 3. So you'll see in the video that I would put even the names of the place values above the numbers. I took away every barrier. And the idea was just to convince the kids that they could do math that was harder than they'd ever seen. So you'll see the impact, and I can talk about afterwards why I think the kids got excited.
Yeah.
Love you too.
Well, let's have a look.
Who thinks they could do that? You just have to say that number. You guys all can read that number, right? You try.
429, 1,237.
You did it. Fantastic. Okay, one last chance, and then we have to go to millions. Okay? Yeah? Okay, here's your last chance for this one. Who thinks they could do that? How about someone who hasn't had a turn yet? I know some of you may not. Yep.
231,000.
Yeah.
237.
Oh, amazing. Okay, who thinks they could go to the millions?
Okay.
Mind blown.
Exciting.
Now, it's just the same game. You say that number and say million. Then you say that number and say 1,000. Then you say that number. Huge number. Who thinks they could read it? Yeah? Do you want to help me? You get me started.
665 million.
Yeah, 625 million, that's right.
231,000. 237.
Unbelievable. That is a big number. Who else thinks they could do that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? Okay. Yeah, he doesn't have a turn. I'll give you a turn. Think you could handle this one? Yeah? 300, yep.
325 million. 315,425.
Unbelievable. Okay, like I really wasn't planning to do this, but I think we have to go up to billions. The next is billions.
It's Christmas.
This is the last one. Okay, you think you could do billions? Yeah? Who thinks they can do billions? Yeah? You think you could do it? I think you could do it. What do you think? You want to try it? Okay, you help me with this one, all right? You gonna help me with this one? Okay, that is a big number. You wanna help me? What's that number? Just say that for me. You get me started. Oh my God, you did it. Then what's this one? See, you did it. That's fantastic. Okay, I give up, you guys. I can't really make it any harder. I could go to trillions. And then quadrillions.
So, John, I'm wondering, in case people weren't watching that and they've got a reason to go back and watch the clip, could you tell us about the little things that you were doing to make sure that everyone could be successful? So you're obviously getting everyone a chance to label those really hard numbers, but you're also, when students were faltering, there were some little moves that you were making there just to help them along the way. Could you help point them out to some people there?
Yeah, and those moves have become just subconscious. I do a lot of demo lessons, including in behavioral classes, including with high school kids. And so I've had to learn these techniques. Well, first of all, I made sure that the kids had practice with numbers, the numbers in the hundreds. Because if any of them couldn't do that, they'd suddenly be out of the class, and you'd have a different class. You wouldn't have that growing excitement. We kind of cheered at the end.
Everyone's participating and feeling successful. Yeah.
As a playwright, when I started volunteering in classrooms, we went from a tutoring organization. Teachers invited us to put tutors in the classroom, and I saw the kids as an audience because I'm a playwright. People never get more excited than in a group. The sociologist Durkheim called it collective effervescence, when we feel a sense of purpose or awe or together. And you can't get collective effervescence. Yeah, and you can't get an audience effect as a playwright, that's what I see, or collective effervescence if you've got kids are excluded. It's a different class.
And they're not on the same page. Yeah.
That's right. So, and here's the funny thing. I say to teachers, you already know the science of learning deeply and you've been pushed away from it. So I say, if you were tutoring a kid in grade 5 and they're 3 years behind, what would you do? And universally, teachers say we'd go back to that level and we would find where the problem started. We would scaffold. We'd give lots of practice and repetition. We'd change what we're doing if it's not working. And we'd teach to mastery because we expect teaching one-on-one that we could teach the child anything. So why do we forget that in a whole classroom? I went back to the right level. I made sure they could all read numbers in the hundreds. The lesson would have failed if I hadn't started at the right level. But the surprising thing is once you get something, once you find a basic conceptual or perceptual building block, you can raise the bar really quickly. So that's why I chose bigger numbers, because once they can read numbers in the hundreds, they can go on.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. Second thing is, a couple times kids made mistakes. Like one kid said the wrong number. I didn't correct them. I just said the right thing and went on, because the minute I say to that kid, you're wrong, or go into a deep explanation, I've lost the momentum of the class.
Lose the rhythm, yeah. And it was even sometimes you gave just the half the word, so you just, I don't know if it was intentional,
That's right.
went just to give the cue for the 100 without saying the word 100.
That's
or that little gesture to go, let's go back to this number here because this wasn't right. So it was actually non-verbal feedback as well that you were doing to keep them in sync.
Yeah.
I was thinking about the choreography of it, that it was actually quite rhythmical, and it was deliberately trying to bring, like a conductor bringing the members of the orchestra in at the right times. So I thought that was quite masterful how you did that. What was your take on it, Rebecca? Because you look a lot at motivation and autonomy support and all of those different theories that help you in the secondary space. What did you get from it?
I think it speaks to this idea that to motivate is a very tricky verb, and I think having motivation divorced from content is often a bad idea. And it means it's not necessarily in the service of learning. So if you can hit that sweet spot and have motivation in the service of learning, then you're really teaching. I've got a question actually just around differentiation. Would you say that the methods that you use reduce the need for differentiation within a class? So that sort of really tailored instruction because it's based on the principle that everyone can learn?
Yeah, and we can keep going. That's such a deep question. I think we differentiate way too much. Our slogan at Jump is differentiated learning without differentiated outcomes. So with just very slight, so for example, if I was going to start giving, in that lesson, I use the excitement that came out of reading these big numbers to do a lesson on place value. And by the end of the lesson, all the kids were regrouping and understanding, because I did a game with money where I showed them what the regrouping step meant. But there were some pretty fast kids in that class, and even by grade 2, you got kids who were way ahead. So by the time I got to regrouping, here was my differentiation. My first questions on the board, all I cared about was the kids doing the regrouping in the ones place, and only write the numbers. Like if you add 7 plus 5, you get 12. Only get the 2 and the 1 in the right place. Know that the 1 is a tens and why. So it's not anti-conceptual. They knew why they were doing it, but that's all I asked the kids to do, because most teachers think, oh, it's the same step, just having the now add the tens, add the 3 numbers in the tens column. That's a completely different concept. And that's where it breaks down for a third of the class. And you've lost them permanently, once the anxiety starts to build. So my first set of questions was just show me the regrouping in the ones place. That's it. And the differentiation is I let the faster kids then add the 10. Well, I made sure everybody got the ones. But I said to the kids first, I'm not a very fast mathematician. As long as you're getting these 2 questions, I'm happy. So you take away the pressure on every kid in the class. And suddenly their brains can work, even the ones who are initially weaker or they're afraid. But again, at that class, some of the kids were moving really fast. So I'd write columns on the board. My next bonus was I give them a number in the hundreds, but the regrouping was only in the ones. And they were only allowed to show the regrouping. They weren't allowed to add everything, so I could just watch everybody. Then the super bonus was you get to add the whole number now. I purposely, because these things are subconscious in me, I made sure there was always a 1 in one of the place values. If the kids couldn't add, I didn't even have to think about it. Because I know if I embarrass that kid or I lose them, I've lost that flow. And then...
having the ones there means that you're not fixating on that new maths fact that you don't have yet. Yeah, exactly.
That's right. Every kid can add something plus 1 by grade 2 usually. And then I just kept going. So my next ones were longer numbers. Then I'd say, because I hid 2 regroupings, can you find them? Just circle where I hid the 2 regroupings. If I had needed to, I didn't need to, because the ones who were initially weaker were speeding up so much they were getting to the bonus questions. If I had to, I'd put 2 regroupings together. Like I can make it harder and harder and harder. I can slow down any faster kid without making anyone feel that they're doing different work. So that's the secret, I think, is that you can differentiate if you're using that micro scaffolding. The bonus questions become a way to occupy kids who are faster, but they should also be like a ramp that's inviting the initially slowest kid in the class to go along that journey.
I often talk about a gradient, but ramp works just as well. It's a gradient of increasing challenge that's available. And that's a real change in mindset, because in most teachers' minds, to differentiate is to give them different work or a different lesson altogether. So some kids will do one thing, maybe a different learning intention for another group of kids. So I think this is really helpful to progress the discussion to say that to get that effervescence across the group, we have to be involved in the same learning. Otherwise, it's like everyone's doing something different. And like you've said, humans pick up on the status, like where are we in the hierarchy? We have different animals in Australia that you don't have in other parts of the world. So sometimes teachers say, okay, I've got my kangaroos, I've got my wombats, I've got my koalas. Everyone figures out that the koalas is the low group, which is apt because koalas sleep for 23 hours a day. Ideally, it's not meant to be low, medium, high, but the kids figure it out. They know which one's the low group because they can see what the kids are doing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same with low floor, high ceiling questions. Those are great for expert learners when kids are able to struggle when they're able to do that work. But, for novice learners, if kids know if they're in the basement or if they're the wombat sleeping, they know that. And you doom them to stay in the basement.
For people who are listening and think, oh, I try and do those low floor, high ceiling questions, or I use those enabling or extending prompts, well, it's a slight twist on that to get closer to the ramp approach that you're trying to do.
That's right. You can give them the stairway up through those levels, and you can make sure everyone is succeeding at the first level.
So leaving the stairs invisible so that they can't find their way up. Yeah. Okay. That's a great way of framing it. We're having such a great time with John Mighton. This is a midway point reminder that this clip is going to keep going. The episode is a little bit longer this week, so if you want to pause here, it's a great spot and you could pick it up another time. Otherwise, get ready for the second half starting now. We've got another clip now. It's long division in a classroom lesson that you've done as well. It's a little bit longer, so I'd love to pause at a different point to pick your brain a little bit. Did you want to tell us just a little flavor of what we're about to see?
I've seen some research that for kids in elementary school, late elementary school, like fractions and division even long division are quite strong predictors of later success. Most people learn long division just as a rote series of steps that they memorize. And so I found that, in Canada, we used to have pennies. We have to just talk about cents. Like we got rid of the penny, the cent. But in the US, there's pennies and dimes. And in Canada, I tell kids what a penny was or a cent was. So you could say, suppose you had three friends who wanted to share 72 cents. And you could write that up in the long division format. And you could say, the 3 is the friends, the 7 is the dimes, and the 2 is the pennies. And you can just give kids practice till they can tell you in any long division what the different terms mean. What's a model for those? And then just by asking the right questions, you can get kids to figure out the whole algorithm themselves and get really excited about it. It doesn't have to be rote. It can be deeply conceptual. They're figuring out how the place values work. So this is part of that lesson. You can even make a mistake
and then you can figure it out, I'm guessing. Yeah, because you can see it.
That's right.
I was trying to convert it into Australian currency. So we used to have 1 cent coins and 2 cent coins. I think that's like a collector's item now because they were phased out when I was a kid. But there's 10 cent pieces as well as 5 cent pieces. So if we imagined that we had a 1 cent piece, you could do it. And the 10 cent piece would be the dime, obviously. So it doesn't sound as good as a dime because that's got a good ring to it. But obviously, 10 cent piece tells you what the place value is at least.
Well, that's
interested to see how this works. Yeah.
Did I put the right number of dimes in the picture? Yeah, because what tells me how many dimes? What number? Yep.
9.
That's right, 9 dimes. Did I put my pennies in the picture?
No.
No. 3 pennies anywhere there? There's my 9 dimes. What symbol am I going to use for my pennies? What will I use for pennies? Yep.
X.
That's right. How many X's should I put down?
3.
That's right. I've got 3 pennies left. 1 dime, 3 pennies. So that in money it would just look like this, right? I have 1 dime left over. If I was trying to divide up 93 cents, gave away all the dimes, I'd have 1 dime left over and 3 pennies. Is that clear? If you're giving it, in fact, I want to show you that because if you guys can actually explain this, you'd be able to teach other people. Most people just do this whole thing. They don't have a clue what the numbers mean. They don't understand anything about this. They just do it. You could actually teach someone if you just could go through the steps and visualize it. So imagine the 9 dimes you're trying to give away. Here they are. 3 dimes, 3 more, and 3 more is 9. And then I get 3 people to come up. No, how many people do I need to come up here? I need 4 people. 1, 2, 3, 4. Come on, here are the 9 dimes. Without me even giving them.
Some of those kids are so happy to be chosen as well. I can't wait.
They're the literal
and if you're not
friends.
watching it, this is physical coins that we're manipulating here, and we're about to demonstrate what's happening at each stage of the algorithm. So it is worth watching this as a clip.
How many do you think you should each get?
2.
That's right. 2 for you. 2 for you. 2 for you and 2 for you. Who can break what's left over? That's right, 1 left over. That's the one in my diagram. But what am I missing? These guys want how much money? What do they want? How much money am I giving them? So what else do I need besides that dime? How many pennies should I have? Okay, now I'm going to give these out. Okay, watch. Tell me if this is fair. I've got 4 coins. Okay? You get the dime. Hold on to that. You get the penny. You get the penny. You get the penny. Is that fair? No. How much money do you have there? 30 cents. How much do you have?
21.
How much do you have? Who got ripped off? Okay. Can we have the dime and the 3 pennies back? That wasn't fair, right? What am I going to do? I can't give the rest of the store, guys. You're out of luck. I can't give this money away. You're out of luck. That's all you're getting. I can't give this away to the 3 of you. No way, because this dime I can't do anything with. I have to cut it up with a metal cutter or something. Is that right?
No.
What do you think of my reasoning?
Hands up
to
as well.
help me think a bit more
So
clearly.
those questions you're asking, like, is that fair? What should I do? Would I have to cut it up? You're prompting that thinking, and you're trying to help them to solve and come to that solution themselves, which is really cool to see.
Yep.
You could divide it, that's why you
Yeah, that's right. The dime in pennies. You're right. You could divide the dime up into pennies. How many pennies should I put in? Remember, it's a dime. It's a dime. Yeah, you're telling me the answer. You're jumping ahead. How many pennies should I get with the dime? 10 more, right? Look at this picture. There's a dime and 3 pennies. How many pennies should I have altogether? 13. A dime and 3 pennies make 13. Okay, watch. Now hold still, guys. I know you need your change. 4. Oh, I forgot. There. I've got 13 pennies down. Now, how can you can tell me there's 13 pennies here? How many does he going to get? 13 pennies. How much is everyone going to get? And if you don't know, I got a hint for you. There's 4 kids. Count by 4. 4, 8, 12. Oh, did I cover? I got 12. Can I go further? I've only got 13 pennies. 4, 8, 12.
No.
No, the number of fingers I have up is in how many pennies each kid's going to get.
3.
That's right. Count by the number of kids, and you'll see they each get 3. Here's your 3. How many is going to be left over?
1.
Okay, smart. 1 left over.
3.
Again, it makes 13 divided in 4. Each is going to get 3. That makes 12, and 1 left over is 13. Okay, is that clear?
Yeah.
Wow. Do you know what, John? I'm going to be really vulnerable here and say I had done that algorithm for years, and I've even taught that algorithm, but I couldn't really explain what we were doing when we were dividing up the hundreds, then the tens, then the ones. I just knew that we were taking the big number and we're making it smaller, and then we're taking the next number and making it smaller again. That dime and pennies demonstration actually explains what we're doing. We're sharing the hundreds place or the tens place first, then the last place that's left over. And obviously anything left has to be renamed or regrouped. That is just brilliant. I just love it. I'm going to use it with my own kids, and I'm going to get the physical money out, and they're going to love it.
Yeah, and that's a case where, this thing that's totally mysterious to everyone, the bring down step, I'm just going to bring it down, bring the number down.
Exactly.
How is a whole civilization, like a whole world, with something that's absolutely trivial, not understanding that? It shows the sense of learned helplessness we have. Okay, I guess we just can't understand it. The other thing is
people rely on a device as well. I'll just
Exactly.
use my phone to divide it, and
Yeah.
that just must be true. Even if it's a non-plausible answer, they wouldn't be able to even figure it out. Yeah, sorry to interrupt you.
Oh no, and the kids figure that out themselves. And that stretch of lesson actually, now when I teach in that lesson, the kids had pencil and paper. They were drawing the pictures. They literally had to draw circles for the friends. They had to first put the dimes in and show how many dimes each person got. That stretch with the kids, normally I would have more assessment happening. When I start the lesson, if it was 4 divided into 93, like that question, I would say to the kids, how many friends? There's 4 friends. And they'd have to draw 3 circles on their whiteboards to show 4 circles, because it's 4 divided into 93. 4 circles with the
four
I
groups,
tell kids I make mistakes all the time. They love that. So it's 4 divided into 93. They would have to draw 4 circles for the 4 friends. I can, if I just teach that step, I can see if I put a few questions up, I can see every kid's got the 4 circles. They're matching, they're drawing the right number of circles for the friends.
Yeah.
Then I could have them, even if they can't divide, they could count one at a time and put the 9 dimes in, 1 per circle. Then they have to know not to put the leftover dime in. So if you have a class that's struggling, because those kids were doing so well, I decided to do a longer extended period with no assessment. Just where I decided
Your
to
demonstration
let the kids,
and questioning.
That's right. I decided to let the kids teach me. When you're micro scaffolding, you can see when the kids are ready for that struggle or to do more. But there's one thing that I would have had to really teach well, go back to, is the idea is you got 4 friends. Why would counting up on your fingers help you distribute them? When you say 4, you show the kids you're putting 1 dime in each circle, or 1 penny in each circle. And then when you say 8, you're putting 4 more in, and it gives you 8 altogether. I would have to teach that more explicitly so the kids could actually draw it and see what's happening when they're skip counting up. So that was one missing element there. But I decided to take that chance.
But conceptually, that was so strong. Exactly. They can see what they're trying to do, like the goal of what we're doing.
Right.
And as you said, the micro scaffolding that you could backfill.
Yeah, exactly.
Then allow them to do all those steps without the prompts. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, so John, you've written a number of books on your methods, and my question is around delivery. So you've obviously got a way with students. We've heard all their excitement on all the clips that we've seen today. And I was wondering how much of it is in the delivery, and can you codify that, or can you get that across in a book?
That's a great question and a bit complicated. So I'm sorry my answers are a bit long sometimes, but you're asking really deep, complicated questions like around differentiation and so on. The answer is yes, but there's 2 different things you have to understand. So first of all, there's just not enough money in the system anywhere any place on earth that I've visited to give teachers enough professional development that they can learn the math deeply like that, micro scaffolding, that they can. And especially teachers are my heroes. They're responsible for the growth of JUMP, but some elementary teachers are folk. They don't know why the bring down step works. And so what we discovered is, first we wrote teachers' guides where the lessons are scaffolded. The questions you're asking, it'll say this, ask this. And even more importantly, the assessments. Like in JUMP, every few minutes, the kids are going to do something. Like they'll draw the picture, they'll do the regrouping step. You don't have to mark everybody. You're just when you're scaffolding like that, you only have to keep your eye on like a third of the kids just to make sure they're getting it. And you have to put up a few bonus questions sometimes. So teachers, we found teachers needed, I wouldn't call them scripts, but they needed very detailed scaffolding. And those scripts that scaffolding is flexible. Teachers can use it or skip steps.
If they don't need it, yeah.
So we had to write very detailed teacher's guide lessons. But then we found teachers were overwhelmed even by those. They're so busy, it takes a while to internalize this stuff. So then we created slides where all the Socratic questions, all the diagrams, all the exercises are at their fingertips that they can project with PowerPoint. So that was one huge discovery. We had to find a way to let the teachers learn the math as they were teaching it.
Yeah.
And we've had some really math-phobic teachers. A couple of teachers, there was an article in a Canadian newspaper, they felt like frauds teaching math. One was so anxious at teachers' college, she would sometimes cry herself to sleep. She didn't think she could get through because of the math. After a couple of years of teaching JUMP, they felt they understood the math so well, and it became their favorite subject to teach. So both of them went on to do masters in math education. So just like every kid can learn the math, every teacher with the right resource. But then, so that's one thing. I said there are 2 elements. The second is teachers have been so pushed away from what they know naturally. They know that if they're tutoring, they're going to scaffold, they're going to get more repetition, so on. But they've been pushed away from that to think, no, a good lesson is you throw out this rich problem with very little guidance and you let kids struggle. Well, that's great for expert learners, but not for novice learners. So we found that we had to give teachers permission to teach the way they know works. And that's actually, I think teachers have a bit of learned helplessness when they stand in front of a group. So what we saw that even with our well-scaffolded lessons, let's suppose there's a lesson on multiplication, 1 digit by multi-digit that involved the number 7. Well, a lot of kids, if I'm doing a demo lesson, I'm not certain the kids can multiply by 7. So I will naturally change that to a 2 because that's the easiest number, or a 5. A 2 probably because there's no regrouping. I can create a question with no regrouping. So that is automatic in me. What I found is not automatic in teachers. Even the greatest teachers who are using our lessons with fidelity won't make those little changes that they would as a tutor. And so now we created that confidence building lesson you saw. We actually wrote these confidence building lessons that teachers can try before they try a jump. Kind of guaranteed to work because we've tested them. They're so micro scaffolded and they don't involve any prior knowledge really, except 1 or 2 things that's in the lesson. So teachers can see, if I think like a tutor, if I'm willing to modify any lesson by making the numbers easier, telling kids the first 2 questions are my expectation. I don't care if you get the rest, using bonus questions. If they get that experience, then they teach our lessons better because they'll modify them. Because our lessons were written for the average student, you have to make those modifications. So those are the 2 things. Teachers need something that they can learn the math from as they teach, and then they have to be given permission to think like a tutor in front of a whole class.
I love this idea of micro scaffolding. I think that in Australia in particular, differentiation has been the dominant way of trying to address student needs, and I don't think it's worked. And I think responsive teaching as a term can be a bit vague, whereas micro scaffolding is really quite specific. It's the kind of things that skilled teachers do in the moment, and they're not necessarily written down. So often the best differentiation we do is the stuff that is not written down.
A great observation, and I think the key to making it work also in a whole classroom is the bonus questions. You have to be willing to throw up a few extra questions, and they should, that ramp, or I can't remember the term you use.
Gradient,
Gradient, like a gradient or a ramp. Those are the 2 things. If you know how to micro scaffold, and sometimes it's very, very minute level, and then you have this gradient. I've done hundreds of demo lessons, even up to grade 8, 9, or higher, something, and I found that those 2 things together, you can occupy a whole class usually. It gets harder as you go higher, but the other day I was in a grade 8 class in a northern community, and I decided I was going to do a lesson on rounding with the kids. And to make it more exciting, I decided I would do that exercise on reading big numbers that I did with the grade 2 kids. And I did it with grade 8 kids. And I thought, I'm taking a bit of a chance. These kids are in grade 8. Are they really going to get excited? They got just as excited as grade 2 kids. Half the class had never read a number in the trillions or the billions. And so then I took the jump lesson, which was identify the place value and then go through the steps of rounding, which I taught conceptually. But with those kids, they all had whiteboards. So I was able to say, once they could read the big numbers and they were excited, I could say, okay, in the number I wrote on the board, tell me what place value the 7 is. And they say, well, it's in the 10,000s or the 10 millions. Or I could say, in the millions place value, tell me what the 10s is, tell me what the hundreds is. And they just wrote a single digit number on their board. I could see the entire class if they knew it or not. And within 5 minutes, they were all like machines holding up place values. Then I just did, instead of the regular jump lesson, I just did rounding in the billions, trillions, and so on. So that's grade 8. And the kids are just like puppy dogs. They just get excited. They want to show off, especially in math. That's the one advantage of math. If they think they're smart in math, they think they're smart in anything. And if you can wake up the lower half of the class and make them feel smart. I did a lesson with a behavioral class in England in the most violent school I've ever seen in my life with grade 6s. And on the 3rd lesson, when we came in, the kids cheered. These kids they thought were unteachable. And the teachers tried one of our confidence builders for about a week, and they said the behavioral kids are now reprimanding the other kids. They want to get on with their lesson because they're so excited about feeling smart.
That's awesome. On that point about that, giving that permission to scaffold more or to make changes in the way that you've made those dynamic changes. I talked today to a group of many of the principals around the state of Victoria. There was a government schools principals conference. And the framework that I put up was saying that we can't have responsive teaching if we're not willing to deviate from the lesson. So the way that we want to be responsive is by making meaningful deviations, those that do push the lesson forward and that meet the needs of the students, not just the lesson that we've planned, but actually the kids that we've got in front of us. Actually, if you know your staff and you know your students, you should be able to make meaningful deviations, and that is what makes it responsive. So that I don't think couldn't be said enough at the moment.
Yeah, that's a great takeaway.
And if you're willing to think like a kid, kids are really naive. I've taught gang members in high school who were kicked out of school. they just want to show off. And they also, they love to make these connections and see patterns, and like we're born for that.
Satisfying.
So teachers think that, oh, I can't possibly, the kid's not going to get excited if I just add another place value on the end. It works universally. And then what happens is the faster kids, they actually benefit, because then you have a whole classroom where they don't have to be the nerd. They can put up their hand.
Nerding out together. Yeah,
that's right. And they also see, oh, everybody in the class is getting better through practice. So they don't get these fixed mindsets where they think, I'm a genius, I don't have to work. They see that the whole class can succeed together. So it's good for everyone in the classroom.
What's your takeaway, Beck?
My takeaway is to put some of the theatre back into teaching. I really connected with this idea that you started out as a playwright and saw those connections.
Me too.
Because I teach a compulsory subject, and we don't always have the biggest fans of English in front of us. So it's compulsory in Australia from K to 12. Yeah, so I think showing that excitement for the subject is something I would like to revitalise. I think sometimes we can meet the students where they're at with their levels of excitement. It's not always a good thing. I think sometimes we have to bring that energy. And I love that idea of effervescence.
I chose math. I chose to found a charity in math, even though I'm also a writer, because I find it's easier to do that micro scaffolding and catch the whole kids up in math. But I once tried an exercise with high school kids where I gave them books of poetry, and I had them glance through the poems, and I taught them what a simile was and what a metaphor was. And then I would say, I'm going to write some phrases on the board, like the tree is, or the moon is, or the tree is like. And I want you to go through the poetry books and pick some phrases that you love that really resonate with you and complete the metaphor or the simile. And so the kids filled up their pages with this stuff, and they started generating the whole sentences. And then I said, now pick the sentences you've written or the phrases you've written that really resonate with you and start putting them together. And is there something missing? Is there something you could fill in between them? And they wrote the most stunning poems. I quote them in the book. I wrote a book, The End of Ignorance, which is my second book on education. I quote from their poems. In fact, I gave credit to one of the kids because I'm also a poet. I wrote a poem with the same first line, and I gave credit to the girl who wrote that. And the kids thanked me afterwards that, they weren't sitting in front of a blank piece of paper trying to generate these ideas. I gave them some structure, and I gave them some material to draw from. And as a writer, because I'm not a natural writer, because I trained myself, I think I'm best as an editor. I use a lot of found material. I use things I overhear on the street or articles that I read. What I'm really good at, once I've got some content, I'm good at finding what's missing in between, editing, rearranging. And so I showed kids that that's a big part of writing. So I think it's never too late for whatever the age, and no matter how hard the subject you're teaching, there's usually a way to scaffold or give kids that experience.
So my takeaway, you've just given it to me now, John, is thinking about how this relates to the broader disciplines also, is to get students generating, to get students creating, that structure and constraint can actually be really helpful.
That's right.
I love that concept. To be creative is to actually work within constraints and to have ideas or things that you generate that are having utility. And that's the tricky bit. You can't just say any idea goes. And that there's a joy in that, because that's the challenge, is that whatever you're teaching, if you give adequate structure, if you have some parameters around what you're asking students to do, you're not only making the creativity more challenging, more interesting, but you're actually making it more possible, because they've got something to work within. And it's not a completely blank canvas, which is almost intimidating, depending on what you're asking the students to do, whether it's creating something physical, creating a work of art with their words, or creating solutions to math problems as well. Look, it has been an absolute joy to have you on. I think we could have talked for a lot longer, and I'd love to catch up when I'm next in Canada. I love your city. My wife and I just love Toronto, and we love to come back, and the kids had a blast. But Rebecca and I are thrilled that you could make the time to join us on Chalk Dust, and we want to thank you for dedicating your time to math education across the world and for giving it to our Chalk Dust listeners today.
Yeah, I'm so honored to talk to you guys. I've heard a lot about your podcast and your work. I'm really thrilled to have this opportunity.
We're very happy to have you, John.
So something exciting to share with you before we sign off on this episode, Beck, is a little bit from our colleague Margaret Batali, who's contacted us from Macaulay Catholic College in Grafton. She's been running Chalk Dust as a Tuesday takeaway, a relaxed optional professional development session where, if we learn a bit more about what they've done, you can expect no readings or PowerPoints and icebreakers, just practical learning. They basically get together and watch a Chalk Dust episode, which I absolutely love, and use it to focus on the things that are important for them and their work. And some lovely little quote there about there's always room to learn and grow, especially when there's caffeine involved. That's a very me quote, Beck.
Yes.
And they grab their lunch, they head to the room, they hit play on the Chalk Dust, and then they chat and recharge. And I think that's just a really nice way to use it. And I want to thank Margaret for being willing to share her little poster that we've just featured there if you want to look at the video. This is a really nice way I think that teachers could actually make use of it, and not a big impost in terms of planning, in terms of follow-up, just having a good time talking about teaching.
And we've heard from a number of schools who've used Chalk Dust this way, and we've also listened to some other feedback about how people are consuming the pod. So we've heard that most of our listeners are actually listeners doing things like listening in the car on their commute to work. So hopefully we've hit the sweet spot with that. Yeah, gardening with the timing. So it's about the length of a commute to work. But what we have heard is that some teachers become a little bit obsessive and want to go away and see all the clips, and they're very time poor. They don't have a lot of time to scroll through the whole episode to locate the clips. So what we've decided is we're going to create a supercut with our amazing editor, Sammy. And every time we release a podcast, we're going to make sure there's a supercut on YouTube that accompanies that podcast. So if you are time poor and you're a car listener, you can just go onto YouTube at the same time the episode is released and just watch the clips alone after you've had that context from the audio.
So we're going to see you there at the next episode or in one of our supercuts. It's been a real pleasure to work with you. If you want to spot those supercut episodes, it'll be something like Season 2, Episode 4X to make it extra fast for you and your learning. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.